Okay, today we're speaking to Guy Lane from Vita Sapien. I've known Guy for about 20 years, or maybe more actually, and we've had a very long standing and affectionate relationship over many years. Guy's been building Vita Sapien for close to a decade now, and he's at the stage where he's looking to invest further in the platform and is seeking opportunities for investment. So today we're going to go through Vita, what it is, the platform, the philosophy that has been developed around it, and importantly, the mission. Obviously, I am Nigel Grier from Grier and Associates, and we're looking to help Guy in his capital raising journey. Guy, good to see you again.
Thanks, Nigel. I think I met you in 2002, so that's 23 years.
Yes, it was at Magnetic Harbour or Nelly Bay Harbour, if my
That's right.
memory serves me correct. Yeah.
That's
And
right.
you were chasing the location of oil palms.
Well, that was one of my many missions at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want me to just to give you a quick background on Vita Sapien and jump straight in?
Great, please.
So I guess I spent 2 years, a couple of years in the oil industry in my 20s, and that's when I really twigged that there was this fundamental misalignment between the interests of the human civilization and the needs of the living planet. And so I went off to do my environmental science degree, and I created CO2, which was the consulting business through which I met you first. And one of the things I've always been motivated by for is just try and find, you know, business ideas or just ideas or technologies that can just basically find a way into a proper relationship with the living planet, which is, after all, our life support system. And I've sort of been looking for something big that had been unexplored, hadn't been found before. And I sort of found that quite by chance back in 2016. And the observation was that, most of the messaging around sustainability is very left brain and very rational and very scientific. And if we do this, then this happens. But what I came to realize was that humans are actually more motivated by what we believe than what we know. And that was really the origins of the idea of Vita Sapien, was to try and establish a belief system that was grounded in science, a worldview, if you like. And that's what I've come to have written, and that's called Vita Sapien Philosophy. And the work that I'm doing through Vita Sapien, the charity, is really to raise the money that we need to actually advance, sharing that philosophy far and wide, because the philosophy creates this, is the best chance we've got of actually surviving this century and then thriving beyond.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned 2016, and obviously this was a sort of embryonic or a catalytic moment for you. But I think the journey goes back a bit further. Obviously, before Vita, you were involved with the Long Future Foundation. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that was a charity that I founded a few years before, the Long Future Foundation, which gave me the learned the tools of how to actually set charities up. That was like a sustainability think tank that had some sort of that investigated some. One of the things we were interested in was these sort of esoteric sustainability risks. For example, the risks associated with the rapidly expanding space industry, ecological risks around that. And we're looking also at the carbon footprint of Bitcoin mining. That I was actually in fact, I was the pioneer. I pioneered the understanding of how Bitcoin's carbon footprint kept going up and up and up. That was work I did back in 2013. But really, if you want to go back further, what I started working on in 2016 was to sort of try and get my head around this idea of where spirituality and sustainability fitted together. And when I say spirituality, I'm not talking about God belief or New Age spirituality. I'm sort of really talking about ecological spirituality, or that spirituality where people have deep love and reverence for nature. And as I started to go into this space, I realized that there were these instances in my life that went back to way before. where I was a lot of trips on my sailing. I used to have a sailing yacht and up the Queensland coast, and these interactions with these seabirds, the brown boobies. And I realized I had this really deep love and reverence for nature, and that's really guided the work through Vita Sapien.
Interesting. Yeah. I was, yes. I understand that you also have studied, is it a Master of Finance in not-for-profits recently?
Yeah, so I did a Master of Business,
Yeah,
majoring in philanthropy and non-profit studies.
yeah.
Yeah.
And where was that and when was that?
That was QUT University in Brisbane. I started that in 2014 and I kind of dilly-dallied around. So I finally got to I get the paperwork through in 2022.
Okay, so a bit of a slow grind, but completed nonetheless. And I guess that's sort of timely considering where you're at now with Vita, and I guess what you see the next few years to look like.
Well, I was going to say, for me, it's a Master of Business, which is, you get some technical information out of that. But,
Yeah.
for me, the advantage has always been that when I do tertiary studies, I just find I can read faster, think deeper. It's a good thing to do personally, irrespective of like job prospects. Um,
Yes.
um, so there's that. Yeah.
No, look, I can relate. I've been doing a postgrad law degree for a number of years now. It's been a slow grind, but I'm finding that intellectually, um, I'm coping a lot better uh, today than I was in the initial years. And I think it's just exercising an aspect of the brain that you wouldn't otherwise normally do. Okay, so that's good. So we've sort of got over the background. Just to give little bit more background, you're also an author, is that correct?
Yeah, so I started writing short stories when I was 17. And then when I was 30 something, 2005, I did a trip to Dubai, to a UN conference in Dubai, through CO2, the consulting work. And I came back from that experience just like really like, wow. And I wanted to tell a big story. So I started learning about writing fiction novels. And so the first novel was called The Oil Price, which is sort of set mainly in Dubai. And then since then, I've written maybe a dozen other fiction novels, all of which have got like sustainability themes. I submitted one recently to the Queensland Literary Awards that was called Steamship Yongler, which was a historical fiction piece set on a real ship that sank off the Queensland coast. Didn't
Yeah.
get
One
shortlisted,
of the top
unfortunately.
one of the top 10 dive wrecks of the world.
Yeah, and I've dived it, and it's absolutely extraordinary. Beautiful, beautiful dive.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. So just just covering off your background, you're an environmental scientist. You've got an undergraduate in environmental science. You've got a postgraduate in Masters of Business with a major in philanthropy and not-for-profits. You're an author, so you understand the power of narratives, and you've been building out the Vita platform. So I think now's a good time just to delve into what is Vita.
Yeah, Vita Sapien is an organization. Vita Sapien is the name also of the philosophy. And at the heart of the philosophy was, firstly, is this sort of recognition, because a big part of this is to do with our spiritual relationship to the living planet. So one of the things I had to do was to get my head around spiritual. And when I first started reading into that, you find that when you're looking for definitions of spirituality, they tend to be extremely narrow and focused. For example, definition of spirituality that you might find in medical literature only really applies to medicine. A definition that applies to religion only really applies to religion. And then if you look at other literature around spirituality, then it's just taken for granted that everyone knows exactly what it is. So a part of this journey was to actually get my head around the subject of spirituality. And as I got my head around that, I started to realize that these relationships that I have with these seabirds and these other interactions, and even the time on the oil ships when I was constantly haranguing people about throwing plastic trash over the side, my environmental activism from 23 years old on oil ships, this is all part of this broader idea of spirituality. And one thing I sort of identified as well was the origins of spirituality in human beings is that Homo sapiens evolved around 300,000 years ago. And for most of that time, there was very little evidence of changes in our behavior and our tool production and so forth. But around 70,000 years ago, 70,000 years ago, is a period they referred to as the cognitive revolution. And this is where the anthropologists start to see the evidence of cave art, of jewelry, funerary practice, and advanced tool production. So this is suggesting that this cognitive revolution created in us not only advanced sort of engineering in terms of being able to generate fine flaked tools and bows and arrows, but also spirituality and art came from this time. So these things were all interconnected. And what happened around 2,500 years ago in a time called the Axial Age, where all of the major religions were founded, or the origins of the major religions, is that there was this separation in the narrative, that there was this separation between spirituality and the sciences. And what I do in Vita Sapien is we integrate the two seamlessly as they were in the very, very beginning. And the other core observation is that for over 80% of the time since we've had this cognitive revolution, our spiritual relationship of human beings has been directly with the ecosystem around us. And it's only in the last few thousand years that we've created these ideas around that have people spiritually connected to gods and other abstracts like that. So the narrative is really that if we can reconnect our spiritual locus to the living planet, then that is going to be at the heart of the solution. And ultimately, the cause of the fundamental cause of the climate and ecological crisis is this detachment of humans spiritually caring about the planet.
Okay. So how does Vita expect to make an impact?
Well, the first thing is to get the book into the hands of lots and lots of people. And that's, on one hand, is simply a book marketing exercise.
Yep. Just tell us about the book first, Guy.
Yeah, so I actually went to the post office to pick up 10 copies of the book today, but for some reason they hadn't arrived, so I can't show it to you. I can show you a previous version of the book just to give you a sense of the size of it. It's what I call a pocket book. So this,
yep.
I started writing these in 2022, and every 6 months or so I did an update as I continued to do my research. But in the last 4 weeks, I've actually reframed the cover and the title. It's basically the same book. It's restructured. So this is the previous version. So it's called Vita Worldview, a Sustainable Life Philosophy, and it's a small pocket book. It takes about an hour and a half to read if you read from cover to cover. And the new one's got the hand on it, and it's called Vita Sapien, a Sustainable Life Philosophy. That's available now. If you want to see that, you can go to the website, put in your email address, and we'll send you the PDF. And you can also buy the ebook and the paperback. But basically, it's trying to take this whole big concept that I've just been describing and put it into a small book. And the other part of it as well is the science in here. So we talk about the Anthropocene, we talk about the planetary boundaries, talk about climate change, we talk about what's coming down the pipeline. And irrespective of what we do, we've set in motion a beast on this planet. And so part of the book is framed around how do we actually face the future. And we use the concept of the Stockdale paradox. And Stockdale paradox relates to Admiral Stockdale, who was a U.S. Navy pilot shot down in Vietnam in the Vietnam War, who said that during his multiple years in captivity, that he saw many of his countrymen perish, and the ones that survived were not the optimists, and they certainly weren't the pessimists, but they were the ones that had a very clear, pragmatic understanding of their situation, and yet maintained a disciplined belief that they would survive the event. And that really is at the heart of the work as well, is that we need to stare into the abyss and to understand the climate and ecological collapse that we have created and understand where it could go, particularly that we may have already actually passed the climate tipping points, but do everything we can to actually fix the mess. And so there's a little action plan in the book. And the aspiration is that if we can actually resolve the Anthropocene crisis, which is perfectly possible technically and financially and in every other way apart from politically, I mean, it's
nature.
ultimately
Yeah.
we just need to get on and do the job, is that we can conceivably actually be on this planet for tens or maybe hundreds of millions of years. And the aspiration outlined in the book is that we survive, the humans are still thriving, playing around with dolphins and seabirds and sailing boats, a galactic year from now. And a galactic year is about 230 million Earth years. And that's completely possible, but we've got to sort this Anthropocene mess out first. And that requires us to enroll many, many more people into the movement. And for the people who are in the movement to improve their expedience, expedience being the efficacy of their environmental activism.
So, so who's your target market? Who's the who is a Vitan?
Yeah, so the term Vitan refers to people who have three characteristics. That they have a deep love and reverence of nature. They may or may not refer to that as spiritual. We do because we have a clearer sort of through the framing in the book, and we have a clearer picture of that spirituality is, everybody has spirituality, and if you have a deep love and reverence of something, that's a spiritual connection. Secondly, they have a trust of science and they're grounded in reality. And thirdly, they're in action to make things better. So we refer to those folk as Vitans. So they already resonate with what's written in the book. We think there's around 53 million or so Vetan adults in the Western world. But the other audience for the book really is people who are sort of on the cusp, people who may trust science and may love nature, but aren't yet in action, and this is what we refer to as proto-Vitans, just to give it a name. And there's probably tens and hundreds of millions of people like that who are starting to understand that something's happening, and all of this kind of right-wing messaging that climate change is a hoax made up by the Chinese is actually hiding something, hiding the reality of the situation. So it's potentially got an audience of hundreds of millions of people. But the challenge, of course, is I've been working on this project over the last few years in bootstrap mode. And now that we've actually got the book complete, to actually get the book out into the hands of lots of people, that's a marketing exercise, and that costs money and effort and time and talent,
Yeah. So you're talking about taking action. So are we talking about like recycling or installing solar on your home, batteries, or buying an EV? Is this the sort of action you're talking about?
So there's the action part in the book. There's two parts. First part is referred to as the transition plan, and that's basically we need to turn off the fossil fuel industry and transition to clean energy. We've got to rewild vast tracts of the planet to get the natural air conditioning systems back through the forests. We've got to clean up the mess left behind by 200 years of industrial activities. We pull the plastic out of the ocean, figure out all the landfills need to be properly packaged up. So there's a broad action plan like that, but there's also 12 what we refer to quests. And one of the quests is called Live with Earthity. And that's one part of that is basically to be a good environmentalist, which is to do all the things that you're just describing. And so, and there are other quests as well. So one of the other quests is called Reinvent New Year. And that's ultimately about reinventing all institutions. To imagine every corporation on the planet needs to have Save the Planet written in their constitution, right? So, we've gone from a relatively sustainable civilization pre-industrial, say 1700. We've knocked down some forests and killed off some animals. We've made bit of a mess here and there, but broadly speaking, the planetary boundaries were still intact. And to have gone from 1700 to 2025, where we've it's now accepted we've broken the coral reefs. We're on the verge. We've broken 6 of the now 7 actually of the planetary boundaries. Ocean acidification just got added to the list. So to have gone from a sustainable civilization to having basically put ourselves on the brink of the abyss in 300 years tells you that all institutions are in on the murder. And I'll give you an example of that. I just did a Master of Business, okay? And not once in 3.5 years of equivalent full-time study, not once did anybody mention that we were in a carbon and ecologically constrained system now. And so we're, the institution of the business schools are basically churning out these students who have got no idea what they're actually doing. And all they're trying to do is to grow the global economy based on cheap energy. And I talked to the head of the business school about this, and he said, well, look, if you want to do sustainable business, you should go to Griffith Uni. Which I thought was pretty funny. So
Well, Rod Welford would have been there at the time too.
yeah, he would have been, yeah.
Yeah,
So there is action written in there, but it's sort of broad scale stuff.
yeah, yeah. Okay. So obviously you've used the term "we" a few times. It's more than you and Vita. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Vita's a registered charity. It's a public company limited by guarantee. We've got three directors, myself, um, Bill Spee is in Sydney, and Nick Bestavar is in Brisbane.
Okay. Now, obviously, you're looking to raise some funds. This is not an investment. This is like a benevolent gift. Is your charity tax deductible?
The charity is not tax deductible. We do not have DGR status. However, there is a program that we've been involved with once before, which we can go back into, which basically creates a DGR status for a project. And the project that we're looking for is to raise around $150,000, basically to kind of really professionalize the Vita Sapien brand, and to bring in some branding experts to help us build up our outreach and our ability to actually start enrolling people into the mission, which ultimately starts with getting the books into people's hands, and also the development of these various programs that we have in mind that we call awakening programs, which are really methods by which we try to connect people at a deep level to the living planet. So from a spiritual, but also like a intellectual perspective. So we've got in mind a whole bunch of different programs, and we really just need to get the resources to actually just take the organization from its bootstrap into a more stable and effective mode.
Yeah. So my understanding is that Vita is a platform, there's a website, you have a book. I know you've got hundreds of hours of content online, and you've got a number of some merchandise that you've produced. But ultimately, it appears to me like you're building a community, right? A community of like-minded people who have had a spiritual experience with nature. And I think about um, Jane Goodall, who passed away recently. And in her autobiography, she discussed a moment in time where she was in Gombe with the chimpanzees, and she was observing the chimps, and she had this experience of oneness with with the chimpanzees, with the rainforest, with the birds, with the insects, where her senses became very heightened, and it was a really profounding, lasting impact upon her life, and an experience she was sort of trying to get back to again for the rest of her life. But it also drove a big part of her, I guess, advocacy and activism around nature. Is this what you're talking about?
Yeah. I had one of my experiences I was on a tuna fishing boat out of Cairns one time in the Coral Sea, and I was resting on the bow of the boat as we were steaming off to another fishing ground. And one of these seabirds, this was actually I think it was one of the boobies. It wasn't the brown booby, but and it
Red-footed boobies?
yeah, maybe it was flying alongside the bow of the boat and about a meter away from me. So it was like right there in the air flying, and it was kind of looking at me and I was looking at it, and it landed on the bow rail. And this idea of the oneness, I mean, there are some experiences you can have in nature where you get like a really kind of like a woo kind of feeling. It's very deep and powerful. And other times it's just like the realization that the bird and I were both fishermen, and we were both taking a rest as we went from one fishing ground to the next. And that's a sort of and here's a way of describing the oneness without making it too deep, is we're all in this together, you know. Like if the humans keep burning 50 gigatons of carbon and overheating the planet, and it ruins our cities and it ruins our economies and it washes us away, in heat waves and wet bulb 35 and category 5 going on 6 hurricanes, right? It's doing the same thing to the seabirds, and they didn't cause the problem, right? And that's a sort of insight which I think is really, really powerful, that we should protect the ecosystem, not for our own interests, but for the interests of the living planet itself. It's been here for 3.8 billion years. It's self-regulating. It does just fine. If there's a massive volcanic eruption, it gets messed up, but then it fixes itself. And along come us human beings, and we've effectively rerunning the Permian extinction about 10 times faster. And in addition to that, we've got tens of millions of tons of plastic floating in the ocean, which is slowly degrading. We've got billions of tons of trash sitting around in landfills that's going to get scoured out when the superstorms come. We've got, 14,000 nuclear weapons sitting there ready to go off, 400 nuclear power stations that need generations of engineering effort to make them safe. We've created this massive, massive mess. And if we don't get it right, we could end up wiping life out on this planet, not to zero, but if you use the Permian extinction as a frame of reference, we've created a situation that could be worse than the Permian extinction, and that killed off 90% of life. And that's what I mean by staring into the abyss, to understand what it is we've actually unleashed, okay? And yet have a deep love and reverence for nature and the faith that we will get through this thing, but then you've got to take the expedient action to make things better. And I think, and that's really at the heart of Vita Sapien, is to try and encourage. You talk about a community. It's not a community of people who have read the philosophy. It's a community of people who are in action to actually fix this mess. Now, they're already out there. So I'm not trying to say that this is the only community of people that are going to fix the planet. I'm just trying to help create a unifying philosophy that can connect them all.
But ultimately, you want to do more than connect them all. You want to, inspire or create new
Yeah.
Viteans. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. And that's right. And so that's the idea of the proto-Vitans, are the people that are just starting to, or are, some way down the journey, but they're not yet in action, or they're not yet trusting of the environmental sciences. So in a way, is to enroll more people into this space.
Okay. So, so tell us more about the next step for Vita. Obviously, you've been able to, you know, um, pull this together with, primarily your time and obviously time investment from others and some seed funding, here and there along the way. But this next phase of, as you've described it, professionalization, um, to invest into the Vita platform, just talk us through what you're envisaging.
Well, the main thing is to get some proper space available to create a proper office slash film studio. A lot of the narrative that we want to share through video. We've had a little scheme running for the last couple of months called Vita TV, which was this platform where all of the YouTube videos, interviews, and other content that's been created over the last 5 years was actually through this live streaming platform. I actually just turned it off yesterday because we weren't able to get traffic to it, because we don't have a proper marketing campaign funded to actually drive traffic to the Vita TV show, and it was costing a monthly fee that we're really bootstrapping, so that money would ideally be put somewhere else. But basically to create a space where we can actually start generating some really high production value video content, get the Vita TV running again. So that was 24/7 live streaming content. And also just, like I say, professionalizing. So working with some branding experts to really tighten up the brand and the messaging. Maybe do a full, get professional edit pass and copy layout for the book. So all of the work that's been done is by myself and a few people that I rope in for editing. And just really and actually really start to reach out and enroll people into this narrative. Create the new social media platforms. At the moment, we just push content out through Blue Sky. But ultimately, we'd want to have a professional social media program with a multiple of different channels, and really just start reaching out to people with the message. That's the main thing. Our conversation thus far has been very kind of left brain and rational, and this happened and that happened, and we want this to happen because of that. I just want to touch back into this kind of spiritual space. And when I talk about spirit, everyone's got spirituality. It's a human being thing, right? Just like you could say to somebody, "Hey, tell me about your olfactory sense," and they go, "What? Oh, I don't think I got one of those." Oh, of course you have, mate. Everyone's got one. And some people, talk about it. Some people know the language. Some people acknowledge it. Some people actually make a living from it. And he's like, "What are you talking about? Olfactory sense." That's the sense of smell. Oh, okay. Because one of the capacities of a human being is the sense of smell. Another capacity of the human being is this thing called spirituality. Okay. And I want to make a distinction. This is written in the book between some very similar concepts: eco-spirituality, spiritual ecology, ecological spirituality, and the term that we use for Vita Sapien, which is ecosystem spirituality. And I just want to give you an example of what that can include, right? So we have this idea called ecophany. Ecophany was a term that I coined in 2016 to describe an ecological epiphany, an awakening to nature. Sometimes that's spiritual, sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's intellectual. Incidentally, that word actually found its way into the title of a peer-reviewed anthropology paper some years later. The paper was titled "From Ecophany to Burnout." But my ecophany, personal experience with it, is in the first instance standing on the bow of a ship called Karen Bravo, heading to Singapore from Taiwan. We're about 10 miles off the coast, and I'm looking over the front of the boat, and I can see plastic bag after plastic bag drifting past, and realizing, wow, what have we done to this planet? Didn't understand at the time the science behind why it was bad, but I just knew that it was bad. Other ecophanies are when the seabird landed on the bow of my sailing boat and put its head under its wing and went to sleep. But there was another little story that I want to tell, which sort of shows the expanse of this idea. A few years ago, I was sitting on a couch in a lounge room, and the TV was playing. I was working on my computer, and I was just sort of intermittently checking in on this TV show. I think it was Catalyst, or one of those science shows on ABC or SBS. And there was video of these scuba divers on the seafloor in the Great Barrier Reef with this big metal pole, and they were shoving this spike into this big sponge. And then they take this spike and they bring it into the laboratory and they pull the material out, and then they chemically treat it and they put it onto some device. And then it comes up on the computer screen with all the bands, and it's showing all of the genes. And they're able to genetically identify the signature that shows that this sponge had been living, not that particular sponge, but these sponges
Oh,
were the
yeah.
very first like animals to evolve, and they can trace the lineage back 3 billion years. And I'm just sitting there with my jaw is just open, and I'm just struck by the wonder of life on Earth, the origination of life on Earth that seems to have happened pretty much as soon as conditions were suitable for it, and that it went from the most simplest forms to the point of this vast abundance with whales and all the different creatures that live with us, and that we have the science to actually have a deep understanding of that. And I was sitting on this chair with my jaw just dropped open with this awe and wonder of the beauty in nature, and the wonder of the power of environmental science to help us understand it, but also to help us understand how to actually live on this planet without breaking it. And really, so Vita Sapien, the word Vita is Latin for life, and the word sapien is about wisdom and knowledge. And really, that's what the movement is trying to do, is to try and get people to attach into life wisdom. That's what Vita Sapien is about.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's been very informative, Guy. I have many anecdotes and similar experiences I could share, but I think we're a bit limited for time.
Well, why don't you share one now and just tell me how is this resonating with you, this sort of concept?
Oh, totally. Yeah, look, I was just thinking about your experience, sort of steaming from Taiwan to Singapore, and I had a similar experience steaming from Suez to Jeddah.
Okay, the Red Sea.
Yes, I'd spent some time um, in the Red Sea, and the Sinai Peninsula, Dahab, and Hurghada, and just amazing, like just epic diving, and the water because very low rainfall, so um, water visibility is just extraordinary, and so anyway, we'd been diving. The Red Sea was beautiful. We've been on this boat, this ship, and there was bow wave with dolphins right in the bow waves and abundance of seabirds, etc. And I remember we'd all had dinner like in the sort of mess area, and the guy got everything all into big black plastic bags. Everything was just plastic plates, plastic cutlery. It
Yeah,
was all disposable. Filled up these big plastic bags,
yeah,
and then the horror just opened up you know
yeah,
the window and just pushed the black plastic bags out of the window and essentially into the Red Sea.
yeah,
And I was just like, stop! What are you doing? And he's like, well, don't worry. In 100 years, it'll be petroleum.
yeah. Not quite, but
And
yeah,
no, of course, but he really believed that.
yeah,
So
yeah,
this was his belief system. Obviously conflicting with my belief system. So belief systems are really powerful, and
yeah,
and you'd be aware of that. And obviously, you've got this sort of Judeo-Christian tradition, and your belief system, depending on where you sit, can be around, the creation and the preservation of creation, and it can be around, go forth and multiply and subdue the earth.
yeah,
So
yeah,
this is a challenge, and I know from the work that we did in Townsville back in the day with Sam Ham and Doug Mackenzie Moore and others, it's impacting somebody's belief systems and
yeah,
changing their behaviour
yeah.
is really really difficult.